Um, the couple of things I wanted to mention before well, first of all, we have a special guest, Craig Belser from Barge Brewing, who we're going to talk to in a little bit. Thanks for joining, Craig. That's
Thank you.
awesome. Um, for the homebrew club stuff before we get started, so I think Stuart had posted that there's now 1,300 members on the Facebook group, which is awesome. 1,300 members. So cheers to that. There you go. Brian's got it going on. I don't.
I gotta grab one.
Um, the club T-shirts. This is a version of what the shirt's going to look like. This is different colors and ink because I decided I didn't like this version that I got done off Etsy, so we went a different direction. But I have an order placed for 24 shirts. 22 are taken, 2 are left for grabs. I forget the sizes. I think it's a large and an extra large. So those shirts are going to be in my possession usually, probably in about a week and a half, and then I'll get with those folks to get those shipped out. Those shirts are meant to be kind of a way to raise money for the club for things like Stewart's. I say Stewart's. He does the wiki. There's wiki fees. There's fees for Zoom. This and that, and then hopefully whenever this pandemic is over, we can do things like have a big club party. And I don't know if there's any other ideas that people have, but that's kind of what it was meant for, right? Not just a blatant cash grab, right? So the other thing that I just started was a podcast version because Ben Fowler had mentioned that it would be cool to have podcasts of kind of some of the stuff that we're doing. So I put up a bunch of the interviews that were done that are on YouTube. Those are now on podcast. You can get them on Podbean, on Spotify, and soon to be Apple Podcasts. The latest interview that I did with Jesse Buffton is also up on YouTube and on podcast, which is great, from Groundbreaker. He's awesome. Totally watch that. Um, my collaboration beer with Ghostfish is scheduled to be released on Tuesday, Groundhog's Day, taproom
Oh, cool.
exclusive only. It's super. I'm super excited about that as well. So this Tuesday, that's supposed to be released. So if you're in Seattle and you can go down and grab yourself a growler, or sit outside on one of their tables, definitely go do that and say that you love it. No. um, we Reed and I brewed that batch back in the middle of December, and so it's been kind of sitting around lagering for a while. So hopefully it tastes delicious. I don't know. Anyone else? Oh, Derek actually had a really cool couple of ideas about maybe different meeting ideas. I don't know. You threw those out via email. I don't know if you want to talk about those briefly. I thought there was a couple of good ideas that we could kind of maybe roll with future meetings once you.
Sure. The quick version was one of them was kind of like a office hours version for new brewers to like come and ask sort of hand holding questions, because I feel like most new brewers ask the same like 15 questions, and some brewers might appreciate some new brewers might appreciate it, just to get people like into the club sort of thing. Um, and then the other one was less of a like formal meeting and more because we did the New Year's social hour, and that was kind of neat. And I thought maybe like more of a social hour or a what are you brewing? Maybe a few people could present if they're doing something interesting, or maybe they like really lock down their process and they want to share about it, something like that.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, I I take an I have there's another Facebook group that's really big that is Milk the Funk, and they have like 30,000 members, and they the thing I don't like about that is that if you don't follow the rules, right? Like if you ask the question that's been asked like 100 times, then they're like, "Screw you!" We don't want to be kind of like that. So I think that's a good idea to have, a resource for new brewers or just a social way to talk about it. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Yeah.
That would be cool because I know it helps me to bounce ideas back and forth off someone just to, dial something in or where did I go wrong? And, it's more productive if it's a conversation than I post something and, 2 or 3 people might say something.
Yeah, let me hang on just a second. Let me send, I guess I got to send the passcode to Kim. She says she can't get in, so hang on just a
Yeah,
second.
and the original idea I had was for like straight up new brewers. So I know when I first got into this a long time ago, it was so difficult to like find stuff, and I can't imagine how many mistakes I made that if I would have just gotten to ask somebody. But the other side is, Brian, that'd be cool too to have a time to like, because Facebook posts are so laggy, right? Like you ask a question, you get a response, and you respond. Whereas something like this, like, and then people can throw out their suggestions, and maybe you can try it or not. That's a good idea too.
All right, like right now, my next big learning curve is water chemistry. And, I mean, it's just one of those things where it's like, I start to think about it and then I get a headache. I'm like, no.
Yeah. Oh man, I did the send in your water sample to Ward Labs thing, and then they came back and gave you, and then you loaded in. But some of the stuff is just like after like some of the, if I don't really want to get into it, I'm just like, screw it. I'm just gonna brew whatever. I don't want to overcomplicate it. Sometimes I want to get super complicated and be like, I'm gonna put it into this fancy calculator and adjust it with these different salts and whatever. But it is a little bit overwhelming, right? Definitely.
Yeah. Well, for a long time, I was just buying spring water because it already has, some minerals to it. So I'm like, oh, it's sort of the easy way. And now I'm brewing more frequently. So like, dude, that's, what, $8-9 on a batch of beer that I can save by using tap water. I got a profile from one of the local homebrew, a member of my local homebrew club. And, I mean, they say that our water is pretty consistent. I mean, we basically have Detroit City water, which I think they pull from the Great Lakes. So I mean, it's pretty consistent. It's just kind of like, God, one more thing to do.
Yeah, just as long as it's not the Flint water. Yeah, just avoid that.
Yeah, no Flint water.
Yeah.
Well,
so
I do like heavy metal. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
but not in my beer.
So we'll try to see. I don't know what the frequency of meetings like that is, or maybe if it's just like maybe every couple months, or I guess we can gauge interest and see what that looks like. I think next month I am thinking of just having it maybe with some more social, like bring your own recipe, like to kind of throw out ideas within the club members, right? So we could definitely
do, just so you don't get overwhelmed, you could do like almost like a sign up, like we got 5 spots for next month's like share your beer. Who wants to share their beer, and then everybody that signed up gets like 5 to 10 minutes to talk about it if there's questions. That way you don't have to try and get like,
yeah, that's a good idea.
Like 20 people in 1 hour, like not happening.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Gonna ask you, Kale, the link on the Facebook page, as you probably just were aware, it asks for the passcode, but there is no passcode in the Facebook link that I could see.
What's up with that? Come on. Well, I like to make it really challenging for people.
Yeah, I just went to my email you sent me that had
like an exclusive club thing.
I don't know if it's the same one every time or not, but
I'll have to work on that next time. Well, they can just watch the recording, so we got to move on. So
that's why we could have had 30 more people.
Next time. It's a very exclusive club, right? So anyway, so Craig Belser, Barge Brewing, thank you for joining us. So why don't we just so I think the kind of the one of the big focuses of this conversation was because Brian had engaged you and I guess was working with you on the Sorghum Malt, which is something you use. But can you just give us like an overview of Barge Brewing and kind of the nuts and bolts and how you got started?
All right. Started in 2003. There was no gluten-free beer on the market. Started in the garage with, we're down here in Kansas City. So I did what pretty much every one of you guys did, which was started finding some grains, malting them. Well, my first batch of beer that I ever produced was on homemade malt. Okay. So I learned how to malt it and brew it. Being in Kansas City, I tried corn and sorghum and just about every grain that there was, and stumbled across sorghum. We actually stumbled across accidentally stumbled across a cultivar of sorghum that doesn't give the sorghum twang, if you know what I'm talking about. And I ended up producing a beer that was indistinguishable from regular beer when it was malted. I was able to make pilsners, and it has weird reaction to hops, different kinds of hops and everything to that effect. But long story short, ran into a business partner in 2000, God, I think it was 4 or 5. Sorry. We ended up producing our first beer in upstate New York at the Flying Bison Brewery, under contract. And we were the first gluten-free beer ever produced. So we ended up being the first. Right after that, Lakefront came out, and a few of the other ones like New Planet came out, and we took off. We were in 9 states in a couple of months. Fairly quickly, we're national and in Canada. I got too big for me. I turned it over. The ex-CEO of Pabst Brewing had retired, by a guy by the name of Brian Kovalchuk. And then I ended up handing over operations to him for the last, up through 2017 when we took it back, when he retired a second time. So we've been making a 100% sorghum malt based beer for the basic 4 ingredients, which is the hops, water, salt, and sorghum and yeast. Done a lot of research. I mean, terabytes at this point of research. We've gotten grants from the USDA to evaluate every cultivar of sorghum that grows in the United States or North America for a 7-year period. Came back and found out that there's very few cultivars of sorghum that don't have that twang that you guys probably, if you've ever tried the Brees unmalted sorghum, you kind of get that back. I call it a kind of a school paste tang to me. And that's what we've been doing. In the last 2 years, I've been working at turning the sorghum, everything that we know about sorghum, into what I call an open source project. We're not trying to keep this stuff close to the chest. I'm trying to get out there and let people know how to brew with sorghum, how to do gluten-free with the enzyme protocol that we end up using. Just basically want people to get sorghum, get it in their hands. It's probably the best brewing ingredient. I've tried the millets, I've tried the rices, and I've tried a lot of the other ones. This one, when properly done, in, again, my opinion, is probably the best best brewing ingredient that I get my hands on. It's the closest to real beer, but cultivar is everything. That there is a definitive, very bad taste to sorghum. So that's where we're at. We're currently in almost all of the U.S. except your guys' neck of the woods, Washington, California, and Oregon. We were in California for years. 2016 we dropped because we were producing on the East Coast, and shipping it was too expensive. We since engaged a pair of breweries, one for Canada that does the brews for all of Canada. We do our brewing under contract.
Okay.
And we have one in St. Louis, Missouri, the O'Fallon Brewing. We do contract brewing, but we do everything from scratch. So we have people grow the grain for us. We put it in a dedicated silo. We independently test to make sure that it's gluten-free before it goes to the malter. We have the malting. We make sure that it's gluten-free coming out of the malt house. We send it to the brewer. We have all the protocols in place to brew and make sure that we're 100% gluten-free. And the entire time that we've brewed beer, we've never had anybody get sick from gluten off of our beer because, being kind of retentive, there's the 5 parts per million rule. If I detect any gluten, it doesn't go out the door. So that was basically it. So we are working on we've been doing one style of beer forever, just because my ex-CEO was kind of unimaginative. So I've been working on quite a few beers since then, and we've come up with a really good methodology. The beer, go ahead.
Are you and Brian had helped me with some questions, and feel free to jump in, Brian, if you want. But so
Okay.
for the malted sorghum, is there where do you guys malt that, and are you looking at other different varieties of like darker roasts and things like that?
Oh, absolutely. So the first thing we do is we've got your what I call a pale roast. It's about the same thing as a pale malt. We're also roasting down into a Munich variety. A lot of what we do, we've done chocolate on a limited run. We haven't done a production run of that yet. We keep doing like a couple of 100 pounds at a time for testing, but we haven't run the big batches yet. The chocolate malt that comes out of sorghum is very interesting. It's got, if you're familiar with Shiraz wine, it's kind of a peppery taste on it. That's really, really interesting. I really, really like it. I've prototyped a beer out of it that came really close to Shiner's Black Lager, if you've ever tried one before. So yeah, and we're working on that. Crystal, after years of research and help with the USDA, I'm pretty sure that a good crystal coming out of any gluten-free malt, because of the gelatinization issues, is pretty much impossible. You've got a couple of good ones out of millet coming out of grouse that are pretty good, but getting really good caramelization on those things is kind of rough. Getting dextrins into the beer can be done by varying the enzyme protocols. Even though we're made out of malt, we use 100% enzymes. We don't try. The enzymes aren't sufficient in any of the grains to make a naturally occurring beer, in my opinion. So, yes, we've got all kinds of malt. Those are going to be coming out. Go ahead.
You keep using the word cultivar, I think. What does that mean?
Oh, sorry. First things first. You eat apples, you got Granny Smiths, Jonathans, Pink Ladies. They all have vastly different taste characteristics. Each of those is a cultivar.
Okay.
So what ends up happening is we have a grain cultivar, and there's no way you can see this, but that is crappy. It's a red sorghum that we end up using now that has really, really good flavor to it. For years, we used a white sorghum. This is the second cultivar. We got about a 20% flavor increase out of this, more beer-like consistency. It tasted better than the one we used for 15 years. And so we just swapped that in 2017. So cultivars are everything in all of these grains. And what I mean is barley, it's not even a thought for the people on barley, because for 500 years they've been breeding barley to make beer. And we've been working on, you get people that are malting grains, but they're just pulling a grain out of an elevator somewhere. They're just going to go buy sorghum. When you do that, an elevator, they don't pay attention to germination. They don't pay attention to whether it's got vomitoxins or alpha toxins or any of these good or bad things in them. And they kind of all mix them together. So if you tried to make an apple pie and you threw 15 kinds of apples in it, it's really not going to taste as distinct as what you can get out of the rest of them. So cultivar is everything, specifically everything on any of these. And I think, grouse on the millet side of the world, and even I think it's Eckhart Malting's got the rice malt.
Yep.
Yeah, and he's doing a pretty good job too. So, cultivar to begin with. If you don't get it, sorghum, and I don't want to get into too many details because I don't want to do this. Sorghum itself, if you get the wrong cultivar, can form a protein matrices around the starch. So all of a sudden you'll try and brew with it, and you'll get next to no extract out of it without boiling the hell out of it, breaking those proteins down. So protein enzymes as a precursor are pretty important. And again, I'm going off the deep end.
Is the sorghum grain that you get, is that local to you in Kansas City area, or where do you get that? And then second question on top of that is that sorghum grain, is it primarily produced for you guys or for Breeze, or for what is the primary use of sorghum like growing in the US to begin with?
Okay, so sorghum is the 4th leading cereal crop in the US. It's a lot bigger. I mean, it's just a lot of cows eat it. Okay.
Oh,
So
okay.
no, I mean, literally put, you've seen it a million times. It's everybody goes, "Hey, you making that cow food beer?" I love that one. But it's the 4th leading cereal crop in the U.S. and it's called milo or sorghum, either one of those, depending on what region of the country you're in. In Africa, they do all kinds of sorghum. I was talking to John Taylor in Africa. That he's the one that's the guy that does it down there. Different kind of brewing for a different kind of beer. They make Bantu beer, which is a crushed beer porridge. But anyway, too many tangents on that. What was the question again? Sorry.
Oh, does the grain you get, was it produced locally in the Kansas City area?
No, this is the one that we ended up doing. We actually working with the seed breeder to improve the quality of this thing. So we've got a gentleman in Texas that's helping us. He's one of the preeminent sorghum breeders. So we work in conjunction with that and the information we get from the USDA to constantly every year look at new cultivars and evaluate them. And then our seed breeder will make higher protein, lower. Right now we're struggling with lower protein on this. And we just this current batch we got it up another 2% right within spec. So he grows it. He sells it to everybody else. He sells it to a lot of other people because it's a very well-performing seed. So it's grown in Kansas, Nebraska, Colorado, Texas, and parts of Missouri. You have to watch where you grow it because if you grow it in certain parts, the sorghum has a little cup-like husk that the seed fits in. If you get late season moisture on this stuff, all of a sudden mold starts growing all over the place. And since sorghum, like millet, has to be germinated in like a mid-70s Fahrenheit, that's just a giant petri dish. You'll end up getting alpha and vomitoxins, which is things that are poisonous to humans. So we get it in the drier climates: western Kansas, southern Nebraska, northern Texas. We skip Oklahoma for some reason. And even in Missouri, where I'm at, it's the northwest corner that you can grow it in. Everything else gets a little bit too funky. So that's it. Yeah, it grows all over the place. If you ever need to get a hold of some, I've got 5 billion silos of the stuff. I know where it's all at. So there you go. That's in general. The only thing that I ever protect is the name of what that cultivar is and what it is, because I'll sell it to anybody in the world, but that intellectual property and the amount of money we invest in that is really the only thing that's keeps Breeze from stealing it and running with it. But they wouldn't do that. I'm giving that as an example.
So you're saying you're the sorghum kingpin then, right? Is that
Nice.
No.
The sorghum kingpin. I love it. Any other questions for Craig? I got a bunch of other questions, but I don't want to hog the.
Yeah, how could we get some? If you're saying that your sorghum makes a world of difference, how could we as homebrewers get our hands on some? Because
you want the sorghum or the sorghum malt?
I mean, personally, I want your beer, but you're not shipping to Hawaii, so I'm going with this whatever we would use in brewing, right? So the sorghum malt, yeah.
Well, 2 things. Sorghum malt, I'm shipping a bunch of it up to Brian. So wave at Brian. He's gonna He's got a couple of bags at it, but I'm going to send him a bunch of the new stuff that I've more aggressively roasted. But I've also, go ahead.
That's not gluten-free home brewing, Brian, though, right?
No, Brian Newcomb.
No.
So Brian, tell
Brian
them about your
Newcomb.
operation.
There's two of us, and we both do, or it's both kind of the same thing. He's talking about me with gluten-free brew supply. You can buy the sorghum malt that,
Nice.
can you see that? And then here's it with, after I crushed it.
Wait, both Brians have gluten-free home brewing
Yeah.
stores.
Yes.
That's
It's not
one of
confusing
you
at all.
has to change your name. One of you is now.
I know, but then we have to fight over it. So it's like, who has the patent on the name Brian? Is it who was into
yeah,
gluten-free beer first, or
last
who
name,
was who's older?
And
What's the name
Brian,
of your shop?
Gluten-free. Oh my god. Glutenfreebrewsupply.com. So right, no, it's gfbsupply.com.
you got to get this
And
right.
the name is Gluten-Free Brew Supply.
And you're in, where are you at, Brian? So
I'm in Detroit.
And so you'd be shipping it out from Detroit to like Hawaii for you, Derek, in that instance, right?
Yeah. So it'd probably be a flat rate box. I think those are good to Hawaii. And I think they're like 75 for a 20-pound.
Keep the name Brian if you can't get the website right, because that wasn't the website.
gfbsupply.com.
GFB.
And while he's looking that up, Craig, and Brian, I'm tracking. Craig, you're gonna sell it wholesale to Brian, and he has a storefront that sells it to retail customers. Is that kind of what you're not selling direct to retail customers?
Yeah, right now I'm not equipped to do any kind of retail sales. I mean, we buy ours by the truckload.
Yeah.
And so what I'm doing is I'm kind of outsourcing it. Give it to Brian, let him take care of it for now, and let's see how well you guys like it. But I even got the easier one than that. One of the other things I'm shipping up to him is because of the way our brewing process goes, our beer. So I've got the malt. We don't use the malt to produce our end product. We actually take our malt and ship it up and have it made into extract. So we do big 3,000-pound totes of extract. Why, do you ask? Because the biggest contamination component in all these breweries is the mill, and the mill, and you can't do anything about the mill and the auger. You can clean and wash with acid all of the brewing equipment in the boil kettle, but you can't guarantee them. So that's a contamination point constantly. In addition to that, because of the brewing protocols, you have to basically almost boil this stuff. You guys know that. There's not a lot of production breweries that can do that. We ran into problems. We produced some at Left Hand Brewing. They had problems getting the grain going through their spent grain capacity because sorghum has a different density. So there's a lot of issues unless you build a brewery from the ground up. To be made for sorghum, there's a lot of brewing issues. The easy button is have somebody produce it for you in big 3,000-pound totes, or, you've seen these guys before. Yep. So we have sorghum malt extract as well. It's 100% malt, it's extract. And then we end up using that because it's a hell of a lot easier. You just pour it in, it's the old fashioned beer. So I'm going to make both of them available through Brian. As far as that goes, I'm trying to get it from a 3,000-pound tote into this in sufficient quantities without doing it myself. So there's a little bit of a delay on that. And then what we do is quite frankly, started doing everybody used the tea bag method on brewing. So if that black lager that I produced, I use most of my fermentables off of that extract. And then what I did is I took all the specialty malts, threw them in a very oversized rice cooker that I had, cooked them all, and then put those into the kettle in a brew in a bag, and then basically went through an enzyme protocol, just enough enzymes to extract what I needed to out of those guys. And there you go. So, you know, we've got a lot, but the extract itself is one of the best bases in the world for just about anything, because you really get that extract that we do a little bit of over modification, not a little bit, but enough to really get that malt punch into the grain. So
I'm curious because there's the Breeze white sorghum syrup, which I think gets a reputation, like you said, with metallic, twangy, like basically all the gluten-free home brewers that I know that are really nerdy and into it want to move away from that as fast as possible, right?
oh
So
yeah,
but it sounds like you have this other product which is like completely different flavor profile. Is it gonna be would it price out something similar to like a can of white sorghum syrup from Breeze? And
I have no idea because I haven't bought one
okay,
from Breeze in a long time.
$9.
yeah, like $10 or something like that, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, our goal was to keep it, or my goal is to keep it. It'll be a little bit more. I mean, it is a more expensive product,
That's
but
better.
reasonably more. You know, so it's not going to be like twice as much. We're talking like, so instead of like my local homebrew shop sells the brie syrup for, I think it's like say $12. We might be at $14, $15. I've had, you know, he had sent me up a couple of sample bottles. It's definitely a lot cleaner, different profile than the Breeze malt or Breeze extract. It's just, you know, there's, like he was kind of describing, you have to take it from a giant tote down to these little 3.3 pound bottles that, you know, I can sell. And that's just a materials handling issue, packaging, you know, a lot of complications there. The first batch I did with the malt, I didn't hit my gravity numbers because I was just, you know, kind of doing the old enzyme protocol. And I just used 2 pounds of that to bring it up to gravity. And I shared a bottle of that, and then a bottle that was, or, you know, the next beer I made was 100% sorghum malt, you know, all grain. And a couple of people I gave it to her couldn't tell the difference.
That right there is the kicker, not being able to tell the difference, because that was before going into business. If you can tell the difference between this and regular beer,
you're gonna have
and
to
they're regular beer drinkers. One is the president of my homebrew, you know, local homebrew club, and his girlfriend is celiac, so that's how we're, you know, friends. And he came over and had the 3 beers that I've made with this, and also one of the guys at the homebrew shop, he tried 2 of them, and he described them, you know, all the things that came from the malt the same, and then, you know, the only difference that he identified was that one was Tetrahop and the other one was Centennial.
So for
and he
this,
preferred the Citra.
sorry,
Go ahead.
So for the sorghum malt, I'm going to call it Barge sorghum just to distinguish.
Yeah, Barge sorghum malt.
Barge sorghum malt. You would still need enzymes to brew with that, I would assume.
Right. With this, to do all grain.
But with the sorghum syrup from the Barge malt, you would not need enzymes like the regular sorghum syrup.
Right. So this is actual LME, you know, because what you get from Breeze isn't, you know, M is standing for malted. So, you know, they just, there's a sorghum syrup. This is sorghum malt extract. And so that one you don't need any enzymes for at all. You could use it just to, as like your base for, kind of like how a lot of times, like when you first start going to grain, you go with a partial mash or the
Partial
like
grain.
the partial grain. You could use it that way. You could use it as 100% of your fermentables. You could keep some on hand just for that. Well, shit, I missed my gravity. I'm going to pour some in until add 2 pounds so I can gain my 20 or 25 points, whatever you need to get to your target.
Brian, you're gonna have to come up with like a marketing slogan for it. You can call, or Brian and Craig, you got to call it like twang-free sorghum syrup or something like that.
Well, the thing I'm going to do is make absolutely sure that I don't call it sorghum syrup, because here's the thing. When I talked about cultivar, the cultivar of sorghum, Brees just is buying commodity sorghum. Now, their sorghum extract is absolutely wonderful for what it is, but it doesn't take, they don't know the cultivar components, so they're buying it, and it doesn't have any malt punch, so you're going to get the twang. It's well brewed as far as that's concerned, but without that malt punch, you don't get it. That to me was the part that, and kind of like Brian said, everything I do anymore, I don't do the big batches when I'm testing. I don't do the big batches from all grain. I use at least 80% extract, and then I just whatever specialty grains that I'm throwing in, go through the enzyme protocol with them.
Nice. So before I started using the millet and rice recently last year, I was using the Brees syrup as well as tapioca syrup as fermentables.
Right.
I was able to get those in the 5-gallon pails, and I would strongly encourage you guys to think about doing some of that. So if there's some folks like out in Oregon or something doing this, that we could maybe go together and order a 5-gallon pail and then, split it up and have a bunch of people brew. Because I found those little containers are really cost prohibitive, particularly when, it's all weight.
Yeah, we could do that.
Just buy the tote from them.
Yeah, buy 3,000 pounds.
Yeah.
Nice.
We do actually have a bunch of buckets right now that I'm going to be sending a couple of them up to Brian.
Speaking of that, I mean, I see Brees sorghum syrup on the shelf at homebrew stores. Like my local homebrew store has sorghum syrup. It's like one of the only gluten-free things that they have, right? Besides hops and things like that. And I'm sure that those things sit on that shelf forever, right? And I don't know what the shelf life. What kind of shelf life would you expect to have for something like this new malt syrup?
If you're taking it and you put it down and you're in a cool place, it's just like anything else. If you leave it in your hot garage over the summer, yeah, well, you're gonna have an effect on it. If you keep it down in your basement, I've had some that's been down there for a couple of years because extract doesn't get that bad. Now, I am not a super taster like everybody else. So the people that make it for us are basically saying, they'll say a year easily, but you could go longer than a year, big time. I literally can't. When it gets to the 4 or 5 year point, because I'll go through and go back and try our periodic taste samples. I keep a library of every batch we've ever made, and I'll go back and test one of them. About 4 or 5 years, it starts getting really dark and caramely, and you start getting what I call a molasses caramel taste to it that comes through on the beer, which actually is kind of nice for different styles of beer, but no, you've got a couple of years on it if you keep it in a nice, cool place.
Okay. Anyone else got questions? I got more questions. Kim, questions? Derek, no, Peter. I got a question about you. It sounds like you started like way long time ago in 2003, where there was like nothing gluten free, so you had to malt your own grains and do all this crazy stuff. And then you took this. Did you take this like super long hiatus and decide you wanted to buy your baby back or start it up again? What happened? Tell us what
Oh,
happened, Craig.
oh well, so I am a programmer of computers by nature, an analyst, and this was an analytical problem. The doctor said you can't have any beer. That's a damn big problem. And at the time, there was no options. Okay. Um, so again, sitting down and doing this thing, uh, I'm also not. I've been the CEO of this company 3 times now, and I don't enjoy being the CEO of a company. I focus on one problem. Let me go brew all day long and play with it and do the technicals and find the next recipe, and I'll break down starch chemistry and enzyme chemistry. That's the fun stuff. Figuring out whether Bob turned his timesheet in is not. So
Yeah.
what happened to me is I ran it for a couple of years. It got way bigger than me. I let the CEO again Brian Kovalchuk, he took it over when he retired from Pabst. Um, he ran it and it was great. He just called me up when he needed technical stuff and he ran it, but he decided to retire. So when he decided to retire, he said, "Well, you're gonna take it back." Yep, I took it back and we changed quite a bit. We moved the malting around and got the logistics down and improved cultivars. That's kind of what I was focusing on. And even now, I just stepped down 6 months ago as CEO. I'm still the president of the company, but I handed the CEO over to a new person that I trained up for the last 2 years to run the business side of it. So that I could just basically concentrate on this because it is my intention to take this and make it available, make the sorghum malt and what we know available. And that's kind of what I'm doing here. You're the first people, I think, besides Brian, that I've publicly started talking about us getting sorghum malt and the sorghum malt extract out. It, in again, my opinion, is a superior product. It's one of the best brewing products for gluten-free that I know of. That's why I've stuck with it all this years. I just want to make sure that everybody can get their hands on it because it'd be really nice. I'm not doing that from a get rich quick scheme or anything to that effect, but I want to move the science of gluten-free brewing forward quite a bit. And I know that people
apply it to commercial brewers as well as home brewers.
Oh, absolutely. That's the whole idea. The idea is we're going to start supplying sorghum malt extract to these people and make. This is not our primary business. We make the Barge beer brand, but you get more people. I've been doing the science on this with a half dozen universities and a couple of USDA folks. And if we start getting that out in the hands, I think the breadth of knowledge is going to increase quite a bit. And that's kind of what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
Because you're starting to see a lot more since you guys started picking it up. You're starting to be a lot more chatter, which means a lot more ideas getting thrown around and they're getting captured and people are building on top of them. And that's kind of how you get great beer.
I think it's a lot more cost effective using a malt extract than all grain if you're in commercial brewing as well. So,
Now, there's a lot of people. I got to tell you, all honesty, right next door to this office, downstairs is a brew pub, and they make a little tiny brew pub and it's in a 1 barrel system. And they went through, I got to do what with this grain, and I got to do how am I going to heat that up, and how do I keep it clean? And I handed him a 5-gallon bucket of this stuff and said, "Here, pour this in your boil kettle, add some hops, and you're good." Yeah. And that was relatively easy for them. There's a lot of people out there on the extract side that just don't want to mess with it. And even me personally, I've got more brewing systems. My attic looks like a homebrew supply shop because I've had to go through every piece of commercial software, and now I'm down to I think there's a Robo Brew or a Grainfather. I can't remember the brand. It's like that one you have behind you, And I use the Brew in the bag because I put my specialty malts in there, and I'll go through a full enzymatic conversion on just those to get all the flavors and pull everything out. And then everything else is just me pouring the extract in the boil kettle.
Yeah.
If you're
That's
brewing
easy.
with the grains that I think Brian was going to be that is currently selling instead of the extract,
Mhm.
and I don't know if you or Brian can answer this question, but what sort of what's the preferred mash schedules on that, and what sort of enzymes, exogenous enzymes, would you want to add to increase your fermentability?
Well, fermentability. Okay, there's two main
I'm gonna
brews.
say I've hit like 95% apparent attenuation on all three that I've made.
So yeah, okay. So
Well,
how do you well, I guess maybe more so like how do you get the starches to convert to sugars in the grain? Like,
oh, okay. Well, let's do it the easy way.
yeah.
100% enzymes. We'll start with there's two brewing protocols. There's the step down one, which is what I use for the specialty grains. Everybody knows that. Boil it 190 degrees on the grain. I'm using. I gotta look over here because I gotta on my other monitor. I'm cheating. Thermomil SCDS. Okay, Thermomil is the high temperature. It is. I've tried absolutely every high temperature one. Thermomil's it. I mean, it's just easy. It's there. You boil it. It's good to go. We do that, and we use a Nutrase, a protein enzyme, a protein degrading enzyme. So we start out, and again, I'm going to throw you up here. Oh, sorry, I was talking about the step down. Damn it. My apologies, Pete.
I don't know if y'all can see this, but that was this is the first batch I made with Centennial, fresh out of
Good.
a bottle.
Nice.
I absolutely love that mug, by the way.
Thanks. And the head formation.
Yeah, this looks good.
So the step down one, put all the grains in at 190 degrees, put in some Thermomil, hold it for 60 minutes. Right? You're going to drop it down. The pH needs to be between 5.5, 5.6 with 100 to 150 parts per million of calcium. Okay, calcium is what drives some of these enzymes to work really well. So your water chemistry on these things is pretty important. You need to reduce chlorine and sulfates, same component. So you're going to keep this in at 190 degrees. That's going to get your gelatinization and your liquefaction. Drop it down to 145 degrees. Again, if you're doing the Odia Pro enzyme mix, it's a way of cheating. That was designed more for barley. So I think, Brian, you're using a Ceramix, aren't you?
I'm using Ceramix and Ondia and Thermomil.
Okay.
And that got me, I started low, I went high, went back down low, and I got 92% mash efficiency. My anvil only boils off a little. I did like a half-hour boil, so I got 95% brew house. I ended up with 8.1% ABV. Finishing gravity was like 1.002, and the starting was 1.065.
And so,
if I remember correctly off the top of my head.
So the Odia, the problem with the Odia is I believe that it's got a bacterial enzyme in it, a bacterial alpha. So for a while I was using what they call an amylase AG300L, which is a bacteriological. This is what I was talking to Brian about. There's two kinds of these lower temperature alpha amylase. One of them is a bacteriological, one is a fungal. The bacteriological, pardon me, is going to chew through all of your starch and convert everything to sugar, and it's going to get glucose all over the place. You're not going to, the longer you leave it in, it'll just keep chewing and chewing and chewing until you have rocket fuel beer. Okay, so I've switched over to, Fungal. It's a Fungal 800L, which is a fungal alpha amylase. And the beautiful thing behind that is you put that in at a little bit lower temperature at 132 degrees, and that thing it'll create predominantly maltose and I'm pulling a blank on the other one, but your sugar profile will be just perfect. But again, going back to Kale's question, is we do a step down where we start at a high temperature, gelatinize, drop it down to 145. That's one way of doing it, and that's how I do it from a specialty perspective. I've sent up to Brian, and I'm happy to share that enzyme protocol, the whole 9 yards, with everybody here. That's not a secret. And so I'll get the notes out to him and Brian, if you would. You got the email list.
Yeah.
Okay. The all grain method that I end up utilizing in the breweries that we have used where we did all grain is completely different. You start out at 122 degrees. You again adjust for calcium. You get a pH at about 6.0. You throw the thermomil and the new trays in. You're going to be 2.6 liters per kilogram ratio grain wise. So it's kind of there. You're going to rest there for 30 minutes. You're going to take it up to 155 degrees. You're going to leave it there for 20 minutes. Hold on a second. That's gonna help gelatinization and thinning in a professional brewery more than anything else. The stir paddle will start dying if you don't give it the rest at this particular stage. We ramp it up to 190 degrees at 1 degree a minute through the rest of gelatinization, and we hold it there for 45 minutes. Now this is a long brew, okay? We add enough cold water to knock it back to 132 degrees. We adjust the pH for the fungal alpha amylase, which knocks it down to 5.2. And then we add a little bit more thermomil, and we hold it at 132 for 45 minutes. And the last thing we do is we raise it back to 180 for 10 minutes, check conversion, and we're ready to go. Now, that is a pain for a home brewer, but enzymatically, that is how you get a really, really good beer. So,
It's gotta be that's a pain for a commercial brewery, isn't it?
oh no, it is. You're absolutely right. But I mean, the thing here is
Wow.
it's fun that this group is here, and that's why I say the step mash, that we found somebody that does that for us. Okay. And that's why we're doing extract, because getting a brewer to do that, what we do is we send 2 truckloads of grain up and turn it into about 2.5 truckloads of malt extract, about 70,000 pounds of the stuff. And we throw it in a warehouse, and then they just take these bags up and pour it in, and you're good. But the extract's the way to go. But the thing here is any of the shortcuts, you're either going to end up with processing problems, or you're going to have beer that doesn't taste as good as it could be. So gluten-free beer is a pain. I've been working on shortening this for a long time, and that is shorter than it was before. It gets significantly easier if you have a cereal cooker in the first place, but I haven't run across a single brewer yet that had one, other than up at your neck of the woods. There's guys that have mash filters.
Yeah, Holland Daily
Brew
does.
Detroit
Yeah.
has a mash filter, and that's completely different from lautering. They just powder it up and put it in an accordion looking thing and squeeze all the stuff out of it.
Glutenberg does that.
Yeah. Glutenberg is Quebec. Yes, that's right. So, yeah. From that perspective, that gets you a really good beer. And again, you can simplify some of that stuff, but it's just really your ability to gelatinize is really it.
We are all gluttons for punishment as gluten-free brewers, so we
Yeah.
we already know all about spending all day in our basements or our garages or out in the snow, wherever it may be, right?
Yeah, I was
Yeah, or your kitchen.
That profile doesn't go too badly with like with my anvil. You know, I mean, I can set my power to like 50%, and it'll just kind of slowly come up, mash in at 125, pitch all three enzymes, you know, let it rise up. And, you know, while it's doing that, I'm off taking a nap or doing whatever, you know, to set an alarm for a few hours later, come back, kick it up to 190, set it for an hour, come back, turn it off so it goes back down, let it just go slowly down. And then I pitched the Andia and Ceramix and let it sit for a bit. That's when I got the 92% mash efficiency. I mean, I think based on the small scale I did on my stovetop, that like the falling mash he described will work great, especially if you're using it as your base grain and then adding in, you know, like the millets and the rices for the, you know, as your specialties. Just cook your couple pounds of sorghum, you know, kind of do like the mashes that, you know, bring it down and then do your normal rising mash if that's what you do. Should be right in there.
The one cheat that you can do that I've got, I went to we have a Chinese equipment store down the road from us, and they sell commercial quality rice cookers. So if you can get a hold of a commercial one that will put multiple pounds of grain in, it is effectively the best cereal cooker you can. You just pour a bunch of water in it, and I haven't dug my calculations out, but then you're fully gelatinized, and then guess what? You don't have to do much of anything from that point. Then you just put the brewing enzymes in. There's a protocol that I've got for that I could dust off, but you know, there's not a lot of people who can get access to that size of rice cooker. But you know, that's another way of doing it. That's the piece of equipment that I used. Again, that one's not in my garage. It's actually down, and I use it quite a bit. But you know, even when you're doing the scanner, it just takes care of the gelatinization issue.
How big of a rice cooker is this, Craig? Is it like?
Oh, geez. I want to say it's a 40 quart.
Whoa.
Yeah, the benefits of buying your toys is my company gets to buy my toys for me. So, but you can go. They have, God, I think there are 3-4 gallon jobs that you can get for under $150.
Mm.
So you know they're out there. They're both gas and you just pour a whole bunch of water in. You throw in the stuff and hit a button and then come back, and it's just like any standard rice cooker. It comes back, it's retained a bunch of water, it's boiled off, fully gelatinized. Looks like cooked oatmeal when you're done. Oh, and if you do that, do put the 2 to 3% rice hulls in it before you do it.
So let's see. I had so what's the you have this Barge brand that seems like it's been going on for a long time. I personally have never experienced it because I'm in Seattle and don't really have access to it. Oh, look at that. I mean, I guess I could just get Peter to ship it to me. But what's the and it seems like you have this very what I would consider unusual business model. I'm used to like these gluten-free brands having like brick and mortar brewery and then buying their grains from elsewhere. You've kind of got this thing that is completely different, which is awesome. It's really cool. But so what's the future hold for Bards and for Craig?
So the beautiful thing behind it is first of all, I'm going to talk about the one component is we don't have a brick and mortar, because the very first time we started out this little brewery in New York called the Flying Bison Brewing. Little 20 barrel system, almost a manual bottling machine. Very small. We were going to produce a little bit and put some up in New York. I had a business partner in New York. We went to the distributors and said, hey, you want to carry a gluten-free beer? What the hell's that? We don't want anything. The hell with it. We don't know anything about gluten-free. We turned around, and all the people that wanted gluten-free beer that had put their names, emails into the website, we sent that out to these guys and said, hey, if you want gluten-free beer, take this piece of paper to your store. It'll go up to the distributors. They'll call us and get it. 2 weeks later, we're all through New York. 6 months later, we're in 9 states. Okay. Nobody grows that fast. And we completely and utterly overwhelmed their ability to make that beer. Then we went over to the West Coast out of San Jose, and we brewed beer there for a while. California is really expensive to brew in. I'll just tell you that much. But the whole idea behind it is we kind of focused on the science and the process. And once we found the process, we turned it over to breweries to make for us under contract. And we have some people that'll do that. So you're right. But from a scalability perspective, every time we do a jump, we're hitting a wall on production. That's why a year ago, we had one brewery. Now we got one in Canada and one in St. Louis. The idea behind us brewing more beer may very well be us adding additional breweries throughout the United States that contract make our beer. As long as they follow the quality standards and we do all third-party verification, we're good. I mean, we test the wort, not the finished beer for gluten, and we make sure that it's below the limit of qualification. We do all of that. So again, what's the future hold? This year, I swear to God, I'm getting my second style out. It is a pain to get a second style out. It really is. But I have been working on it for forever, and it's kind of as soon as I finish the argument with my current CEO as to which one of the ones we're going to do. Do we want the black lager? Do we want a Bock that's a light beer, which sounds strange, but it's a 99 calorie Bock and it's delicious. And again, how much fun can I have? So what I want to do this year very much is get the brewing materials out in everybody's hands so they can start playing with it, so that then we can start talking about ideas on, I want everybody to talk about what made the greatest beer in the world. Because I think what happens here is with you all going out there and saying, oh my God, I tried this and that. And, I had somebody the other day try a Saison with this stuff. It was horrible. It was really horrible. It was, I've had good Saisons before. I've had bad ones. This was horrible. And he knows who he is. It was brewing technique, not him. But at the end of the day, I have a feeling that if we can get the proper brewing materials in front of people, I think that there's going to be a lot more discovery, and there's going to be advancements in the gluten-free. Because primarily here, yes, great. I love making money and running my company, but at the end of the day, I have celiac disease, and what I want to do is I want to go to the store and be able to try 15 different types of beer that are worth a darn. Because there's a lot of gluten-free beers out there right now that have not had the ability to get the correct materials, but they're really, really good breweries. So what can we do with gluten-free brewing in general if we cross those really good breweries with the really good materials? So, for us and for Barge here, that's why we call it an open source. Let's get the materials out in the general public and make it. So that's my future. I want my second and third style of beers, and I want to get this material out so that we can end up having more than that, because I would love to start doing seasonals. My personal goal is to be able to crack a Barge porter. And I have prototyped it, and it's wonderful. When I was telling you that we roast sorghum and you kind of get that peppery taste like a Shiraz wine, it is delicious. But
there you go. That you just spilled the beans, didn't you? Right, Craig? Well, that sounds awesome. Thank you. Does anyone have any other questions? We're kind of over time. Anyone have any other last questions?
Craig, early on you mentioned about some hops work well with the sorghum and some don't.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that, and what kind of yeast are you using?
Beautiful. Yeast. We'll start with hops. Saw's hops in sorghum for some reason ends up, and I'm going to probably talk about Brian's cat here, and it tastes like cat pee. I'm sorry, it's horrible. It's really, and I don't know why that is. So hops will react differently. So one of the things from a paradigm perspective, when you do gluten-free, you cannot religiously, the gluten-free brewing that I've done is 90% the same as the barley folks, but there's that 10%. And so from a hops perspective, Tettnang, Hallertau, any of the noble German hops and the German yeasts, and this is not a preference of, I do love German style beers, but for some reason those work way better. They bring out the malt attenuation. An American ale yeast, the dry little pink packets of I can't remember what it was.
They fail.
Yeah. It's American ale. Different ones that brings out a really malt taste, but you end up needing to use a different hops with that, maybe like a Centennial or something to that effect.
Like this one.
Yes. So hops are everything, but they're gonna react a little bit different. You'll need to do it. But again, stay away from saws. Wow, sorry, that was
Not good.
Well, definitely knowing what not to do. I mean, in my opinion, in every aspect of life, knowing what not to do is more important than knowing what to do.
Yeah.
I was going to mention real quick that I haven't brewed this one yet, but based on the few brews I have done, you could make a light beer or a session beer with 5 pounds of the sorghum malt. Now give you 5 gallons at about 4%.
Yeah.
That's really good. Nice.
And I mean, so that's like, that 20-pound boxing sound, that's 4 beers.
Sorry, the other thing I was going to say, yeasts, on the yeast aspect of it. I use the old why yeast smack packs and don't smack them. I think everybody does that. Just pour it in. I've got a centrifuge and do it that way. Yeast wise, what did you use on that, Brian?
This was USO5.
That the little pink pack? Sorry, the US is
Safale.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I forget what color it is.
It's pink.
It's pink
Okay.
or red, depending on what you see.
I've started using some of the Mangrove Jack products, and they're good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love using the Kvike, and then that brings up a whole new thing because I tried 2 different strains. One was from the UK, and then one was from Laumond. And the one from the UK dropped crystal clear in like 2 weeks, and the one from Laumond took forever to drop out.
Well, I will tell
and
you.
then
Go ahead.
go ahead.
I'll let you go.
Okay, I was gonna say, I know like some of the pictures I posted earlier showed this having kind of like a lot of red and haze to it.
Mhm.
This is the first one. This is with it's got 2 pounds of extract to the 5-gallon batch. And hopefully you can see how much it's cleared up since then.
Nice.
Yeah,
nice.
it looks great.
And the earlier when I was drinking, I mean, it will go very clear and yellow. You just gotta let it sit. And I don't use gelatin or anything like that. So
One other thing that is universal across gluten-free beers, head retention is not good. I think everybody realizes that. There's a product out there that we have played with using and have had good results with. It's called Tetrahop Gold. And what it is, it's actually a product that you can buy like a liter of it. You apply it with droppers. You can do it post fermentation. What you do is you take 5 IBUs out of your recipe, throw it away. Don't put the hops in, and replace it with 5 IBUs of this Tetrahops or Tetrahops Gold. It is meant for light struck beer to protect against it, but what it does is gives you an amazing head retention. That's what we ended up, those little nice peanut butter lacing. So if anything, depending on anywhere you go, if you can ever get your hands on that Tetrahops Gold, stuff's wonderful. You don't need a liter of it would do probably a 50 barrel batch of beer. So if we can get those guys to start putting it out there in eyedroppers, I literally can turn my beer into an IPA by putting 2 or 3 drops in one of my beers. And
Another thing for Brian to sell, right?
yeah, exactly.
Nice. Good job, Brian.
Go,
And
Brian.
that's kind of where I'm trying to go with this is, like, I'm not as interested in selling, say, Yakima Valley hops. I want to sell the things that we need that we can't get right now.
That's cool.
It might not be the most profitable business model, but I mean, I'm not in this for the profit. I have a job in a hospital. That's how I pay my bills. This is to help spread, the good word of gluten-free beer.
It's for the love of beer, man.
Right, for the love of beer.
There you go.
So we're kind of run a little bit over, and I'm soon to see little children running rampant in my house if I continue this any longer. So anyone else have any last questions?
I had one last quick
One last
one.
question? Okay.
Hopefully it's quick. You guys went from obviously the bottles to cans.
Right.
Last little while. Probably the best thing you ever did. Because now I can put it in my hockey bag and it doesn't break.
That's exactly why we put it to get in cans, by the way, is for lifestyle.
Yeah.
I wanted to go on a canoe trip.
Yeah. Fits in my golf bag and my hockey bag, so thank you. I was just going to ask as well, whereabouts in Canada is it brewed? Is it back east in Ontario or?
New Brunswick Brewery.
Oh, really? Wow.
So it's a darn good brewery down in that neck of the woods. And where are you located at?
Vancouver.
Oh, see.
I'll get mine up and going and I'll brew some for you.
All right.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks, Craig. Thanks, Craig, for joining and taking the time on a Sunday to go over Barge and the sorghum malt and the new sorghum syrup that is going to be at Brian's shop here in the not so distant future. I'll post this up on YouTube for everyone to watch. That's not that couldn't make it, and I'll send you the link too, Craig, if you're not a club member. And I think we're all good. And everyone enjoy the rest of their Sunday. Happy
Thank you.
Have a good
brewing.
one.
Will
Great.
do.
Thanks, everybody.
Nice to see y'all.
Take care.
Thank you. Thank you, Greg.
All right.
Awesome job. Thanks.